So what are we owed then if we are the ultimate creditor? We extend goodwill. The question of goodwill is concealed through the convention of money. But if we are, say, the system's ultimate creditors, what are we owed? Like, are we owed life? What kind of life would that be? So once again, if we work back, that if we produce ourselves as consumers, and that involves the totalizing claim of a buyer's journey, the life that we are owed is the life that is marketed to us to entrain our vision not to know where we are when we cannot be spatially orientated towards the market for our time, or the way how we acquit ourselves of our unavowed religiosity or transcendentalism when time has been spiritualized. So the life that we are owed is a life that we are sold. And yet if people cannot buy, all right, cannot attain that life that's been sold, then you have a major disconnect. You can look at the question of goodwill in that way, is that you cannot obviously engender the envisaging necessary, because that's what people are owed when they extend goodwill to a system, and yet the system cannot, through the corruption, spiritual poverty of the worldview, live up to it. Then this is the way how that you can look at the civilizational breakdown, but from a spiritual question. Always people, when they talk about civilizational collapse, never look at it. They look at it from power dynamics. They don't look at it from that you're the resource. You're it. You create the world. All right. The sooner, and that's why maybe we could look at the paradigm within the West. Or people always talk about Rome collapsing and then relate it to the West collapsing kind of now. All right, but then you've got to look at it, well, what's the spiritual question that underwrites the civilizational domain? And so if you think of along those lines, that ultimately that you, through your own actions, participate in the system that ultimately is marginalizing or discounting you, what are you owed? So if you look at it from that perspective, well, what's owed? If what you're owed, you cannot be sold that life, then you invest in social movements. So, make America great again. So people invest in the spiritual aspiration of that. If you're looking at, say, wokeism as an endemic thing that goes around the West, you invest in social movements. You invest in the Palestinian cause, the cause of Palestinians, all to invest in something where you can talk about the question of justice that's not existentially grounded. Because through doing that, you're allowing people to invest in the form of life of the consumer. It's never framed this way, because once again, people just never refuse to ask these foundational questions about the way how time's given to them. How do they produce themselves as a demand center, and say demand justice for the Palestinians, demand justice for Indigenous peoples, demand. It just goes on and on. Demand. So therefore, seek recompensance, or seek the very apparatus, the very institutions that are the ones that are creating the issues in the first place. And so then beholden to the same spiritual poverty or the same corruption, spiritual corruption, basically, that these things just revel in. Once again, so if you think what's owed to you, right? So you're owed compensation. You're owed compensation. That's why, why else is you owed compensation? So from what Europeans did to indigenous or like, from slavery. So restitution. There must be some recompense for such grievous ills, hundreds of years ago. So this is where it just enables people to invest in social movements. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't literally, they're substitutable. This is the whole point about them, because it's designed to substitute, and it's designed for causes that are always subordinate or derivative to the primary cause of your existential status, knowing that you are a credit instrument. And so therefore, if you know that you're a credit instrument, how are you managed in reference to spiritual aspiration? Well, the whole game is designed just to push you in towards certain things, so you don't ask spiritual questions then, because if, like I said, if you extending goodwill, then what's owed to you as that ultimate creditor, and what happens that, well, social movement is now owed to you. Here you go, have a social movement for your aspirations. Invest in demagogues. Here we go, here's a person that comes along that says something and then just does everything that any other kind of parasite would do. And so what you get is you get the dead ends. And why? Because it substitutes for a question that relates to your, ultimately to your existential status. And I find it's the easiest way you can understand any of the connection between, so selling life, the way how it's given as a buyer's journey, enables you to sell values, and it enables you to sell the accoutrements of lifestyle. They're literally the same thing, because the whole thing is designed for people to continually discount the questioning of their existential status when they're given as a demand center and interchangeable economic unit. People refuse to accept that if I invest myself in a movement for social justice, that I'm not a consumer. Well, fucking course you are. Of course you are. Because you would then reserve, like, look at it in this perspective. It's easy. If you go take time out for a protest, your time's given as an economic good. As I always say, it's a totalising claim made on time. So the system doesn't care the way that you spend your time, because you're always spending it as the economic good or the means utilised to produce you as the very demand centre that they credit you, or the whole system credits. It's a headless beast. Nobody credits you. Nobody knows. All right, so once again, you step back from that. So then you're active. You're an active participant in your own bonded servitude. And so therefore you look at, okay, you're the ultimate creditor. You extend goodwill. What are you owed? What are you owed? Why do we seek compensation? That's ultimately what we're doing. What we're doing is through the question of goodwill and the way how it becomes captured, it's a disavow responsibility. And so what we're owed is compensation. That legitimised money making, because through money making, obviously, there's a disavow, or that you allow parasitism, or you allow the question of the credit to become given to institutions that are meant to preserve trust. And yet that trust is constantly abused over and over and over again, and people don't fucking learn. Like, it's through history, it's hundreds of years in the making, if not thousands of years in the making. You're still investing in these fucking institutions because you're not fucking asking this primary fucking question of what drives your actions, is spiritual question. It's like, what animates your life? If you're seeking a return, then ultimately you are compensating for an existential lack that is literally grounded in your belief, your religiosity. And yet, because you externalize the questioning, you won't recognize that. You'll get sold, and being sold, invest in another redundant, like a redundancy. And so therefore, any potential for change or transformation that relates to the self, through the transformation of the self, that would then be reflected in the culture, because you become obviously the torchbearer of that. And obviously, if you share that with other people, then you're creating a spirit that pervades, that is very much the domain. Right? You no longer become a site of expiation if you're animating what is without origination. How can anybody leverage anything out of you when you're doing justice to your first birth? I mean, it's just this. So therefore, what's owed to you? Don't you owe something to yourself? Think of that. All right. So the world owes us a living? No, but then you've got to think, well, all right, let's say it does. It owes you a living, but it only you make living the life that's been sold to you. It's literally, you can understand the nature of the vicious circle. So what do you owe the self? Well, let's look at that. So, all right, so you extend goodwill, and what you owed is you're owed the self. What do you owe yourself? But think of what the self is there. The self is a marginal self, because you invest time with a value, or you see time marginally. So once again, you see what you do in reference to your life, but then discount the production process of the consumer in order for the marginal self to be put in it. I mean, like, so what you owe yourself is what? You know, to make good on what? To make good on the claim that you'll quit yourself of, so therefore you can be successful. Well, what would that success be if the totalising claim of a buyer's journey has been set for your aspirations? I mean, once again, you know, you're not looking at this thing holistically. So therefore, what do you owe the self? Well, then you think, what's the self? All right, so you either got a marginal self, or you got an indivisible self. You either got a whole self, or you either got one that seeks basically to make up for an existential lack, all right, so therefore compensates for that, or that you do justice to you being born, the child that you are, and the way how that you can grow into to be the wholeness, or to vivify life, all right. Why? Through expressing like the love of life, all right, through animating what is without origination. So does the self originate? Can your actions partake of the origin story that you can't trace the origin of, let's say? Look at it from that perspective. And so in turn, if you're given as the no ones of the world, or the ones that create the world, does the no ones of the world, in order to animate what is without origination, become the ancestors that are lost? Think of it along those lines. All right, so you don't credit yourself with creativity because you're an interchangeable economic unit, you're a demand centre. And yet, mate, what would happen if the no ones of the world start to recognise, actually, we do create the world. What we've done is we extended this goodwill, all right, and through that we legitimise an outsourcing operation. And yet, even that outsourcing operation, we create it. Right? Imagine if you had people that recognise that. And then what would happen? What do you owe? You owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself, and then you say, well, you owe it to life. Well, then it comes, well, what's the life? Is the life that you've been sold? All right, to invest in your own entrainment, not to see where you are when you've spiritualized time. So once again, that would be the whole necessity of selling you something, so you don't know where you are. If the labyrinth is a line, okay, the labyrinth is a line. It's the most intractable labyrinth, is a labyrinth of a line, because you're like a chicken that's been fucking hypnotized with a line, and you don't recognize that it's designed to hypnotize you. So you can't, because you won't move. You're a fucking chicken. You won't understand where you are when you spiritualize time. So what do you owe it to the self? You owe it to the self that you discount. You owe it to the self that you discount. The self that you discount is the one that you feel that you don't have the ability to actually be great, to put into motion a bequeathal beyond the self that you're sold. So that would be that ultimate, that bequeathal, the destining. So taking the fates and weaving the fates into a destining. That's what you owe the self, is to overcome the self. This is Nietzsche's kind of like overman, as it were. So therefore, to create beyond the self. So to create beyond the self is to create beyond the interest of the self that you invest in as an economic agent, to aspire to greatness, as it were. All these things are there. You can understand why. All right, so think of the way how it gets, all the potential for change gets diverted into dead ends. So if the spiritual aspiration is in reference to what would be the revival of the nation state, but the nation state obviously is still beholden to the spirituality of life given as a compensation, it's still got the same worldview. All right, so the spiritual renewal, when it's in reference to a nation, doesn't address, well, it's the way how that you spiritualize what that means to people. So therefore, you can have the aspiration for it and it will sit here, but then you've got your everydayness, which is just commercial. So once again, what drives your actions? If they're money making, so that's life given as a compensation, you invest in the consumer, and so you discount the presencing of the creative self, and so therefore what you would owe to the self, or what you would owe to your descendants, just transcend basically this situation that we find ourselves in, to revive, to have a spiritual and cultural renaissance. So what do you owe the self? Is it the future self? Well, is it the future self, or is it a self that's lost on you? And that's the way how you bequeath. That's the way how the ancestor that you become it becomes lost. It becomes lost, and so because it's through all the turns that you take with other people, given in the same way, that you bequeath the destiny to your descendants. And so how can your descendants how can your descendants in that case revere you, but through like one person when it's all of you? So that's why the ancestor becomes lost, because it's all of you doing it. You're doing it as a people. So all these people are doing it, and so that's why the ancestor that becomes lost means all of you. It means literally all of you, because every single creative turn is equal in the sense of the animating of a principle without origination. So the way how that you no longer allow your actions to be animated by a false transcendence, because the transcendence is transcending the self that you would otherwise invest in. And so that's the way how you become lost. And through becoming lost, the ancestor is revered. All right, the ancestors that we all become is revered. You cannot trace the genealogy of it, because if all the change is as a result of all the different turns people take, you can't trace it. The no one becomes the lost ancestor. And if that's the case, there's so much power in people to create beyond their own captivation. And so what do you owe the self? You're the creditor. You extend goodwill. You have a sense of loyalty to a fault. What would happen when you defaulted on that and start to recognize actually how much power you have, the power to animate creation, the power to dream creation beyond a buyer's journey, the difference between expiation and initiation, between a buyer's journey and a walkabout.